This video will contain many spoilers for Cyberpunk 2077. There aren't many games with as tumultuous a story as Cyberpunk 2077. From its initial announcement way back in May 2012, we had to wait a whopping 8 years for its eventual release in December 2020. Within those 8 years, CD Projekt Red decided to also release one of the greatest games of all time in The Witcher 3, that would influence countless RPGs to this very day. Expectations were obviously quite high for Cyberpunk 2077, with CDPR promising a living, breathing city where NPCs would undertake daily routines, you could purchase apartments and environmental takedowns, to name a few. These features, alongside a host of others, just weren't in the game at all. Every aspect of the game felt half-baked. Most missions would play out the same way for everybody, some dialogue wouldn't sound right, the world would feel empty and lifeless. Night City looked gorgeous, there's absolutely no disputing that, but it never felt like a real place. This was one of the biggest detractors of the game. It was clear that this game wasn't finished, and nothing proved that more than the technical state of the game. Cyberpunk 2077 was absolutely hanging on by a thread. I played this game on release day, and I think I can confidently claim that Cyberpunk 2077 at launch was the most buggy and downright broken game I've ever played in my life. I had near 30 crashes on my way to the platinum, in addition to a host of bugs that would plague my game from Act 2 onwards. Some pretty funny, and some not so much. It was a game that was just clearly not ready for release, and needed a whole lot more time in the oven. The console version of the game was so bad, in fact, that both Microsoft and Sony were issuing refunds for players that had bought the game and were unhappy with its technical state. Sony even temporarily delisted the game from the store, meaning you couldn't actually purchase it. That is absolutely insane. For the following 3 years, CDPR would continue to update Cyberpunk with the goal of getting it to the point where it should have been on release. And that leads us to where we are now. In September 2023, Cyberpunk 2.0 has released, with the game now finally in the state it should have been when it launched. So, I decided to replay Cyberpunk 2077 almost 3 years since my initial playthrough, to see if the game has finally fixed the issues that plagued the game upon its release, as well as take a look at the new features on offer. The most prominent alteration with Cyberpunk 2.0 is the overhaul of the perk system. Before this update, the perk system was really lacking. There were far too many skills that didn't really do much. There were a lot that were merely minor stat buffs that were relatively pointless. They've changed it now, but unfortunately I still feel it's lacking. There's still a lot of perks here that just seem pointless to me and my build. So it eventually gets to a point where you've just got perks for everything, and the idea of a build itself becomes sort of meaningless because you can do everything. And that's pretty disappointing for an RPG. It's an improvement from before, but still not really enough in my opinion. A big change I've noticed now is that the police actually do things. On launch, if you committed a crime in front of police, they'd sort of just stand there and watch you drive away, and they wouldn't really chase you. Now, they actually do chase you. On a couple of occasions, I'd accidentally run someone over or something, as you do, and I'd then have to escape the police. It's got a 5-star wanted level system, and then once you max it out, you get introduced to max tack, which isn't exactly ideal. I'm happy this change was made because it was dumb before, but I'd be lying if I said it had some grand impact on the game on a larger scale. In a similar vein to this is vehicle combat. You can now shoot people while driving, something that, if I'm being honest, is a bit pointless. Very few situations ever require this, and it's almost always easier to just drive away. Again, it's nice it's there as an option, but I'd barely ever utilised it. The revamped cyberware, however, is a great change. There's a load of new cyberware options which is brilliant to see. On launch, I was kinda installing cyberware just for the sake of it, and it wouldn't really do much to alter my gameplay. But now there's a decent amount more here, which is great to see. This also ties into the overhauled clothing system. You can wear whatever the hell you like without it impacting your stats. Armor level is now tied to your cyberware, meaning you can make your V look as cool as mine, with zero drawbacks. The money economy also makes sense now. On launch, money was far too scarce in the game, but on my recent playthrough, I've noticed almost zero issues with having enough money. It makes much more sense, considering you are a hired merc, completing all these high stakes jobs and heists. You should have enough money to survive. So, they're the biggest changes I've noticed. But now, we're going to talk about Cyberpunk 2077 as a whole. This is a game that wasn't allowed a fair analysis before. If you said it was good, you were blindly defending capitalistic greed. If you said it was bad, you were merely a sheep, blindly following the internet. But now, I feel it's easier to appreciate what Cyberpunk did well, and what it didn't, without having to worry about when your next crash will occur. Act 1 of Cyberpunk was always fantastic. It showed the vision the developers had for the rest of the game before they were forced to rush the following 2 acts. I chose the Street Kid backstory this time after choosing Nomad on my first playthrough. I have to say though, I much preferred Nomad. The bond you develop with Jackie happens very quickly, yet it's done in a charming and believable way. He steals every scene he's in, and whilst it is upsetting that he's not in the game more, his character arc and its effect on V is handled well. His surprising death scene also holds a lot more emotional weight when he doesn't have a gun spinning in his face. Such was the bug I had on launch.
Biochip. Hold on to it. For me.
Also, his memorial is as emotional as ever. Great mission.
I'm not going to tell you what kind of man my son was, or lament about how much I miss him.
Then, our introduction to Johnny Silverhand is also outstanding. Playing as a terrorist committing an act of terror with the nonchalance of someone completing a single errand shows us what kind of guy Johnny is from the get-go. He's also played superbly by Keanu Reeves. People saying he's miscast in the role must have played a different game to me. I think he absolutely nails it. The relationship between V and Johnny, developing from 2 reluctant people trapped in the same brain into genuine friends that want to work together to solve their situation, is expertly done and easily the highlight of the experience.
Remember you whining for smokes in the middle of the night? Complaining about not being able to kill me?
Never thought we'd make it this far.
This is where we're going to talk about Cyberpunk's biggest triumph, its characters. Act 2 introduces many different overlapping main quests where you spend time with different people, then opening up side quests tied to said people. What I love about these side quests is that they're not just random side quests, they've got strong themes that relate directly to the struggles of the character going through them. For example, you've got Judy, one of the best characters in the whole game. Her side quests are focused around fighting for justice, or more accurately revenge, against a system that abuses individuals for all their worth, then disposes of them once they've outlived their purpose. It's gripping, emotional, and has the perfect ending with the scuba diving mission, one of my favourites of the whole game. Then, we've also got the excellent Panam. You know a character is going to be important when your first mission with them introduces them arse first. Panam struggles a bit with identity and purpose. She wants to stay loyal to the clan, but constantly butts head with its leader, Saul. She's erratic and impulsive, but with a strong moral compass at the heart of it all. Most games simply don't make characters this complex, and they're littered all over this damn game. The Johnny side quests also are so damn imperative to he and V's relationship, I'm actually kind of baffled that they're not mandatory main quests. Helping Johnny get closure with those closest to him is so touching, with awesome moments such as the drive-in with Rogue and the phenomenally written reunion with Kerry. This stuff is just excellent. Even letting Johnny perform on stage one last time was a great moment. Whilst it's true that a lot of the side missions in Cyberpunk are relatively pointless, the gigs, for example, don't do much more than offer you a chance to make some money and kill some people, there's still a flurry of excellent side missions scattered throughout Night City. My personal favourites would be the mission with the paralyses, where you attempt to get to the bottom of some suspicious behaviour that they've been noticing, culminating in a lose-lose situation for V. There's the short but sweet tailing mission, where Johnny narrates the whole thing like an old noir movie. That was just a load of fun.
Her, the lady in pink, breaker of hearts, framed by a halo of cigarette smoke. I followed her.
Dreaming of the day the narrator put a fucking plug in it.
And then there's the wonderful Cinnamon questline, which does something a lot of the game doesn't do enough of. It uses the cyberpunk setting and genre to ask the player introspective questions relevant to the modern day. It focuses on whether true redemption is maintainable and how far one must go in order to atone for their sins.
Several people in cold blood, and it didn't mean anything to me at the time. But behind bars, you get all the time in the world to think. And I thought to correct the errors of my ways.
It's a shame the rest of the game doesn't get as philosophical as this questline does. The main story, for example, features excellent characters and an engaging premise, but it doesn't really utilise the cyberpunk subgenre as much as it could have. This is a setting founded on the premise of oversaturation of pleasure, of how humans go off the rails when exposed to an overwhelming supply of instant gratification. The game has the foundation to explore this, or even how sentient one who has filled half their body with rheumatic implants could possibly be, but it doesn't, and I feel that's a massive shame and a missed opportunity. The excellent Cloudpunk, which I played this year, handles this particular aspect of the setting much better. I do like the main story of Cyberpunk, but if the characters weren't as strong, it would undoubtedly have fallen rather flat, although you could argue that is a silly thing to say, especially considering it is a character-driven narrative. Like many RPGs, it also suffers massively from ludonarrative dissonance, which is where there's a conflict present between the themes of the narrative and the execution of the gameplay. The main story expresses this need for urgency. V is dying. He must come up with a solution to the Johnny Silverhand in his head, or he will literally lose his life. Yet, you're inclined to run around Night City completing random side missions for random people and meeting people just because that's where the game shines the most. V wouldn't be tailing the bartender's wife for 3,000 eddies when he could drop dead at literally any point. The game also has a host of endings, though, that all feel satisfying in some way or another, depending on the choices you make in the third act, and the third act alone, really. The combat is something I always enjoyed about the game, and it's just as fun as before. You can utilise your cyberware in combat if you apply the relevant modifications to V. But there's also a bunch of awesome weapons to find and use. Smart weapons are really cool and auto-lock onto your enemies. Shotguns have a real kick to them that make them feel decidedly awesome to fire. Plus, getting a headshot with a rifle has just the right amount of snap to it that you'll feel like a badass every single time. Speaking in a general sense, the weapons just have really responsive feedback. They feel really good to use. These are excellent FPS mechanics on show, and they are simply exemplary for the industry. I can't believe we've gotten this far into the video without mentioning Night City itself. It's easily one of the best settings I've played in a video game. My main complaint upon launch was how it looked gorgeous, but it felt dead. NPCs would just walk back and forth constantly. Now though, it feels much more like a real place, that you're just a teeny tiny insignificant component with it. And that's the best compliment I could give it. It feels real, finally. It's of course still gorgeous, the game is dripping in neon, and I do love me some neon, and it's simply jaw-droppingly stunning. The lighting in this game is top of the line for this industry. Night City is arguably this game's biggest highlight. I do, however, still have a few qualms with the game, even after these 3 years. I see the driving often receiving praise, but I really don't think it's all too impressive. It's serviceable, but I'm not sure it's necessarily worthy of praise. I still noticed a fair amount of bugs as well, nothing game breaking and nothing that I really minded. Games of such a scale as this one are bound to have bugs in them. Like, there was one moment where everyone was drinking out of imaginary bottles, that was pretty funny, and a couple times my vehicle would get stuck in stuff, which I remember happening a lot at launch, but these are all minor and actually gave me a good laugh. I cannot explain how much I hate doing the brain dances, screw those things. Every time I'd have to do one, I'd roll my eyes so far back into my head I could see my throat. Okay, maybe that's a little bit of an exaggeration, but they're not fun, they're boring, and I hate them. There's also a general lack of choice and consequence in the main game. Every major event will happen regardless of choices you make and will mostly happen the exact same way. Obviously, you can save Takamura at the end of Act 2, which can change the ending, but other than that, it's essentially just choosing which ending you want from a menu at the end. Cyberpunk 2077 is one of the most insane video game phenomenons of all time. Everything from its premature announcement to its shambolic launch, the tumultuous journey to regaining consumer support, to the excellent game that sits before us today. Cyberpunk 2077 is a game that shows us how good video games could be, while simultaneously warning us of the dangers blind faith has on the industry. It's a marvel that displays both the worst and the best this medium has to offer. The Cyberpunk of 2023 is a game that, a few bugs aside, exists as a technical marvel, shaming recent games of the same genre for not adapting to its ambitious structure almost 3 years later. I loved Starfield, but for a game that released 3 years after Cyberpunk, to still force you to sift through menus in order to move from place to place, illustrates to us that Cyberpunk is a game we should be thankful exists. Both because it's an awesome game, and also as a cautionary tale of what happens when a game is rushed out the door, fueled by greed, and how to win back that trust by committing to what was initially promised. And that, my friends, is the story of the rocky redemption of Cyberpunk 2077. Hello everybody, thank you so much for making it to the end of this video. It's by far my longest video and I worked really hard on it, so if you did enjoy it, please do leave a like as it goes a long way to helping out the channel, and always consider subscribing if you're interested in seeing more videos from me. But for now, that is all. Have a nice day and goodbye.
On behalf of the staff of the Independent California Motel, I wish you all sweet dreams.